For honour and a good name are easily taken away, but not easily restored. Thus you see that it is summarily forbidden to speak any evil of our neighbour, however the civil government, preachers, father and mother accept it, on the understanding that this commandment does not allow evil to go unpunished. Now, as according to the 5th commandment, no one is to be injured in body, and yet Master Hans, the executioner, is excepted, who by virtue of his office does his neighbour no good, but only evil and harm, and nevertheless does not sin against God's commandment, because God has on his own account instituted that office. For he has reserved punishment for his own good pleasure, as he threatens in the 1st commandment. Just so also, although no one has a right in his own person to judge and condemn anybody, yet if they to whose office it belongs fail to do it, they sin as well as he who would do so of his own accord, without such office. For here necessity requires one to speak of the evil, to prefer charges, to investigate and testify, and it is not different from the case of a physician, who is sometimes compelled to examine and handle the patient whom he is to cure in secret parts. Just so governments, father and mother, brothers and sisters, and other good friends are under obligation to each other to reprove evil wherever it is needful and profitable. But the true way in this matter would be to observe the order according to the Gospel, Matthew chapter 18, verse 15, where Christ says, "If thy brother shall trespass against thee, go and tell him his fault between thee and him alone." Here you have a precious and excellent teaching for governing well the tongue, which is to be carefully observed against this detestable misuse. Let this then be your rule, that you do not too readily spread evil concerning your neighbour and slander him to others, but admonish him privately that he may amend his life. Likewise also, if some one report to you what this or that one has done, teach him too, to go and admonish him personally if he have seen it himself, but if not, that he hold his tongue. The same you can learn also from the daily government of the household. For when the master of the house sees that the servant does not do what he ought, he admonishes him personally. But if he were so foolish as to let the servant sit at home, and went on the streets to complain of him to his neighbours, he would no doubt be told, "You fool, what does that concern us? Why do you not tell it to him?" Behold, that would be acting quite brotherly, so that the evil would be stayed, and your neighbour would retain his honour. As Christ also says in the same place, "If he hear thee, thou hast gained thy brother." Then you have done a great and excellent work, for do you think it is a little matter to gain a brother? Let all monks and holy orders step forth with all their works melted together into one mass, and see if they can boast that they have gained a brother. Further, Christ teaches, "But if he will not hear thee, then take with thee 1 or 2 more, that in the mouth of 2 or 3 witnesses every word may be established." So he whom it concerns is always to be treated with personally, and not to be spoken of without his knowledge. But if that do not avail, then bring it publicly before the community, whether before the civil or the ecclesiastical tribunal. For then you do not stand alone, but you have those witnesses with you, by whom you can convict the guilty one, relying on whom the judge can pronounce sentence and punish. This is the right and regular course for checking and reforming a wicked person. But if we gossip about another in all corners and stir the filth, no one will be reformed, and afterwards, when we are about to stand up and bear witness, we deny having said so. Therefore it would serve such tongues right if their itch for slander were severely punished, as a warning to others. If you were acting for your neighbour's reformation, or from love of the truth, you would not sneak about secretly, nor shun the day and the light. All this has been said regarding secret sins. But where the sin is quite public, so that the judge and everybody know it, you can without any sin avoid him and let him go, because he has brought himself into disgrace, and you may also publicly testify concerning him. For when a matter is public in the light of day, there can be no slandering, or false judging or testifying, as, when we now reprove the Pope with his doctrine, which is publicly set forth in books, and proclaimed in all the world. For where the sin is public, the reproof also must be public, that every one may learn to guard against it. Thus we have now the sum and general understanding of this commandment, to wit, that no one do any injury with the tongue to his neighbour, whether friend or foe, nor speak evil of him, no matter whether it be true or false, unless it be done by commandment or for his reformation, but that every one employ his tongue and make it serve for the best of every one else, to cover up his neighbour's sins and infirmities, excuse them, palliate and garnish them with his own reputation. The chief reason for this should be the one which Christ alleges in the Gospel, in which he comprehends all commandments respecting our neighbour. Matthew chapter 7, verse 12. Whatsoever ye would that men should do to you, do ye even so to them. Even nature teaches the same thing in our own bodies, as St. Paul says, 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 22. Much more, those members of the body which seem to be more feeble are necessary, and those members of the body which we think to be less honourable, upon these we bestow more abundant honour, and our uncomely parts have more abundant comeliness. No one covers his face, eyes, nose, and mouth, for they, being in themselves the most honourable members which we have, do not require it, but the most infirm members, of which we are ashamed, we cover with all diligence. Hands, eyes, and the whole body must help to cover and conceal them. Thus also among ourselves should we adorn whatever blemishes and infirmities we find in our neighbour, and serve and help him to promote his honour to the best of our ability, and, on the other hand, prevent whatever may be discreditable to him. And it is especially an excellent and noble virtue for one always to explain advantageously, and put the best construction upon all he may hear of his neighbour, if it be not notoriously evil, or at any rate to condone it over and against the poisonous tongues that are busy wherever they can pry out and discover something to blame in a neighbour, and that explain and pervert it in the worst way, as is done now especially with the precious word of God and its preachers. There are comprehended, therefore, in this commandment quite a multitude of good works, which please God most highly, and bring abundant good and blessing, if only the blind world and the false saints would recognize them. For there is nothing on or in entire man which can do both greater and more extensive good or harm in spiritual and in temporal matters than the tongue, though it is the least and feeblest member. The 9th and 10th commandments. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's house. Thou shalt not covet thy neighbour's wife, nor his manservant, nor his maidservant, nor his cattle, nor anything that is his. These two commandments are given quite exclusively to the Jews. Nevertheless, in part they also concern us, for they do not interpret them as referring to unchastity or theft, because these are sufficiently forbidden above. They also thought that they had kept all those when they had done or not done the external act. Therefore God has added these two commandments in order that it be esteemed as sin, and forbidden to desire or in any way to aim at getting our neighbour's wife or possessions, and especially because under the Jewish government manservants and maidservants were not free as now to serve for wages as long as they pleased, but were their master's property, with their body and all they had, as cattle and other possessions. Moreover, every man had power over his wife to put her away publicly by giving her a bill of divorce and to take another. Therefore, they were in constant danger among each other, that if one took a fancy to another's wife, he might allege any reason both to dismiss his own wife and to estrange the other's wife from him, that he might obtain her